the world is now standing on a knife's edge. Following the devastating Israeli airstrikes on June 13, 2025, which targeted the heart of Iran's nuclear program and eliminated key military and scientific personnel, an uneasy silence has fallen over the Middle East, punctuated only by the initial, furious exchange of fire. Iran's leadership, under immense pressure from its people and its hardline factions, must now formulate a response. The initial volley of ballistic missiles fired toward Israel, while a clear signal of defiance was largely blunted by Israel's sophisticated multi-layered air defense systems. This initial, almost reflexive retaliation has done little to satisfy the calls for vengeance echoing through Tehran, and it has not altered the new strategic reality. The world now waits, holding its breath, to see what Iran's next move will be. The stakes could not be higher for the Iranian regime. For years, its nuclear program has been a central pillar of its national pride and its strategic doctrine, a perceived deterrent against foreign aggression and a key to regional dominance. The Israeli attack was not just a military setback, it was a profound national humiliation. The strikes demonstrated a shocking vulnerability at the core of Iran's defense establishment, leaving its most guarded secrets exposed and its most advanced facilities in ruins. Now, the Supreme Leader and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps are faced with a monumental decision. How do they restore their credibility and deter future attacks without triggering a full-scale regional war that they are ill-equipped to win? This is the critical question that is being debated in the highest echelons of power in Tehran. The international community is watching with profound anxiety. The United States has moved naval assets into the region, sending a clear message of support for its Israeli ally, while simultaneously urging restraint on all sides. European capitals are engaged in a flurry of diplomatic activity, attempting to de-escalate a crisis that threatens to spiral out of control, potentially disrupting global energy supplies and triggering a wider conflict that could draw in global powers. Every statement from Tehran is being parsed for clues, every troop movement monitored. The initial Iranian missile response was a predictable but ultimately contained act. The true danger lies in the calculated, long-term strategy that Iran will choose to pursue in the weeks and months to come. The citizens of Iran and Israel are living in a state of heightened alert, their daily lives upended by the specter of war. In Israel, air raid sirens have become a grimly familiar sound, and the presence of the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow missile defense systems provides a shield, but not a guarantee of absolute safety. In Iran, there is a mixture of anger, fear, and nationalist fervor. The government must channel this public sentiment carefully. A response that is seen as too weak could risk internal instability, while a response that is too aggressive could invite even more catastrophic retaliation from Israel and its powerful allies. The path forward for Iran is fraught with peril at every turn, and the choices made in the coming days will define the security landscape of the Middle East for a generation. Iran's fundamental strategic challenge in this conflict is one of geography. A direct conventional military confrontation with Israel is a logistical nightmare for Tehran. The two nations are separated by more than 1,000 kilometers, with the territories of Iraq, Syria, and Jordan lying in between. This vast distance makes a sustained ground invasion or a large-scale air campaign virtually impossible for Iran's armed forces. Unlike a neighboring state, Iran cannot mass troops on Israel's border or easily project its air power into Israeli airspace. Any conventional attack would have to traverse hostile or contested skies, facing advanced detection and interception capabilities every step of the way. This geographical reality severely limits Iran's ability to inflict the kind of overwhelming symmetric damage that its leaders might wish to impose in retaliation. Furthermore, there is a significant disparity in conventional military technology and capability. Israel, backed by decades of unwavering American support and driven by its own innovative defense industry, possesses one of the most advanced air forces in the world. Its F-35 and F-15 fighter jets, equipped with cutting-edge electronic warfare systems, are far superior to Iran's aging fleet, which is a mix of American-made planes from the pre-1979 era and less sophisticated Russian and Chinese aircraft. Iran's regular army and navy are designed primarily for regional defense and asymmetric warfare within the Persian Gulf, not for power projection across the entire Middle East. In any direct force-on-force engagement far from its own shores, Iran's military would be at a crippling disadvantage. Israel's defensive architecture presents another formidable obstacle. The country is protected by a multi-layered shield of the world's most advanced anti-missile systems. The Iron Dome handles short-range rockets and mortars, David's Sling intercepts medium-range missiles, and the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems are designed to shoot down long-range ballistic missiles, even outside the Earth's atmosphere. While Iran's initial missile barrage demonstrated an ability to reach Israeli territory, the high interception rate proved the efficacy of this defensive network. To overwhelm these defenses would require a massive, sustained salvo of hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles and drones, a feat that would rapidly deplete Iran's most valuable strategic assets and leave it vulnerable to a devastating counterattack on its launch sites and command centers. Confronted with these daunting realities, Iranian military planners must recognize that a conventional war with Israel is a war they cannot win. Any attempt to engage in a tit-for-tat escalation using conventional forces would likely result in the further degradation of Iran's military and industrial capacity. The Israeli military has demonstrated its willingness and ability to strike with precision deep inside Iranian territory, a capability that Iran cannot reliably match against hardened Israeli targets. This asymmetry forces Iran away from the traditional battlefield and toward other, more indirect and unconventional methods of retaliation. The real danger, therefore, lies not in a conventional war, but in the alternative paths Iran might choose in its quest for retribution. Facing the limitations of its conventional military, Iran turns to its well-honed tools of asymmetric power, beginning with its missile and drone arsenal. This is Iran's primary instrument for projecting force. However, as the initial retaliation showed, this option has its own set of challenges. While Iran possesses a large inventory of ballistic missiles and attack drones, their effectiveness against a well-defended adversary like Israel is questionable. Each launch is a gamble. A significant portion of the projectiles will be intercepted, and those that get through may not strike targets of strategic value. Furthermore, every launch site that is activated becomes an immediate target for Israeli counterstrikes. A large-scale missile campaign would be incredibly costly, quickly drain Iran's most prized military assets, and invite a devastating response that could cripple its missile program for years to come. Another key component of Iran's foreign policy is its network of regional proxies, often referred to as the axis of resistance. This network includes groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen. In theory, Iran could activate these groups to open multiple fronts against Israel. Hezbollah, with its reported arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles, represents the most significant threat. However, activating Hezbollah for a full-scale war carries enormous risks for Iran. It would likely trigger a catastrophic conflict in Lebanon, potentially destroying the very asset Iran has spent decades building. It could also provoke a direct and massive Israeli retaliation, not just against Hezbollah, but against Iran itself, as Israel holds Tehran ultimately responsible for its proxy's actions. The digital battlefield offers another avenue for retaliation. Iran has invested heavily in its cyber warfare capabilities and has a history of launching disruptive attacks against its adversaries, targeting infrastructure, government websites, and private companies. A major cyber attack against Israel's critical infrastructure, such as its power grid, water systems, or financial sector, is a definite possibility. This option is attractive because it offers a degree of deniability and is less likely to provoke a massive kinetic military response. However, Israel also possesses world-class cyber defense and offensive capabilities. Any Iranian cyber attack would likely be met with a powerful counterattack targeting Iran's own fragile infrastructure, potentially causing widespread chaos within Iran itself and escalating the conflict in the unseen digital realm. Each of these options presents Tehran with a difficult cost-benefit analysis. A missile attack is a direct but potentially ineffective show of force. Unleashing proxies is a powerful but dangerously escalatory move that could lead to the loss of valuable strategic partners and a wider war. Cyber warfare is a more subtle tool, but it is a double-edged sword in a world where offensive and defensive capabilities are closely matched among major state actors. None of these choices guarantees a decisive strategic victory for Iran. Instead, they all risk further escalation and retribution, pushing the regime into an even more precarious position. This dilemma is what makes Iran's next move so unpredictable and so dangerous for the entire region. Delving deeper into the shadows of asymmetric conflict, Iran could resort to its historical playbook of supporting terrorism against Israeli and Western targets around the globe. This method has long been a tool of the IRGC's Quds force, allowing Iran to strike its enemies at a distance while maintaining a degree of plausible deniability. Covert cells could be activated to target Israeli embassies, community centers, or tourists abroad. Such an attack would be relatively low cost for Iran to execute, and would be designed to inflict psychological pain, demonstrating that no Israeli citizen is safe anywhere in the world. However, this path is fraught with immense diplomatic and strategic peril. A successful terrorist attack that is definitively traced back to Tehran would invite universal condemnation and could trigger crippling international sanctions, isolating Iran even further from the global community. This approach also carries the risk of a severe and unpredictable Israeli response. Israel has a long-standing policy of holding state sponsors of terror directly accountable. The Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, is renowned for its global reach and its willingness to conduct targeted assassinations of those it deems responsible for attacks on its citizens. If Iran were to orchestrate a major terrorist act, it could expect a covert and lethal response aimed directly at the planners and commanders within the Quds force, potentially even on Iranian soil. This would represent a significant escalation in the shadow war between the two nations, moving beyond military targets to individuals and risking a cycle of assassinations and retaliatory attacks that would be difficult to control or de-escalate. Another highly dangerous option for Iran is to leverage its geographic position to threaten global energy supplies. Approximately 1/5 of the world's oil consumption passes through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway that Iran's coastline dominates. The IRGC Navy could attempt to disrupt or completely block this choke point by laying mines, attacking oil tankers with drones and fast boats, or firing anti-ship missiles. Such an action would cause an immediate and dramatic spike in global oil prices, creating economic chaos and putting immense pressure on the United States and other world powers to intervene. It is a powerful asymmetric tool designed to inflict economic pain on the entire world as a way to punish Israel and its allies. However, interfering with the Strait of Hormuz is perhaps the most dangerous red line Iran could cross. The United States has explicitly stated for decades that freedom of navigation through the strait is a vital national security interest. Any attempt by Iran to close it would almost certainly trigger a swift and overwhelming military response from the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet, which is based in nearby Bahrain. A conflict in the Strait of Hormuz would not be a limited engagement with Israel. It would be a direct war with the United States and a coalition of international partners. For the Iranian regime, this would be a suicidal gambit, risking the complete destruction of its naval forces and coastal military infrastructure. So it remains a weapon of last resort, a threat more powerful in its implication than in its actual execution. Faced with the inadequacy of its conventional and asymmetric options, Iran's leaders may be forced to consider the most drastic and consequential response of all, abandoning all pretenses and making a final dash to build a nuclear weapon. This represents the real long-term threat stemming from the Israeli strikes. The attack on June 13th, designed to set back the nuclear program, may have paradoxically created the ultimate justification for its acceleration. Hardliners in Tehran can now argue, more persuasively than ever, that the only true guarantee of the nation's sovereignty and the regime's survival is the possession of a nuclear deterrent. They can claim that treaties and international agreements have failed to protect them, leaving the bomb as their only shield against foreign aggression. Such a decision would begin with a formal and public withdrawal from the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or NPT. This act would sever Iran's last remaining ties to the international arms control regime and signal its unambiguous intent to the world. Following this declaration, Iran would expel all international inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency, plunging its nuclear activities into a black box hidden from outside scrutiny. This would remove the world's eyes and ears from facilities like Natanz and Fordow, allowing Iran to pursue weaponization activities without the risk of immediate discovery. The ambiguity that once surrounded the program would be gone, replaced by a clear and terrifying certainty. With inspectors gone, Iran would then likely begin enriching its existing stockpiles of uranium to weapons-grade levels, aiming for the 90% purity required for a fission bomb. While the Israeli strikes damaged key facilities, it is unlikely they destroyed all of Iran's centrifuges or its entire stockpile of low-enriched uranium, some of which may be stored in secret hardened locations. The scientists who were not killed in the strikes possessed the knowledge, and now they would have the political mandate to proceed at maximum speed. The critical question would be how long this so-called breakout time would take, the time required to produce enough fissile material for a single weapon. Experts estimate this could be a matter of weeks or a few months, a window of time too short for diplomacy to be effective. The final, most challenging step is weaponization, designing and building a warhead compact enough to be delivered by a ballistic missile. This is a complex engineering feat, but it is not an insurmountable one. Iran has a sophisticated missile program and has likely conducted theoretical work on warhead design for years. The Israeli strikes may have destroyed research centers and killed key personnel, but the knowledge base likely survives. This decision to build the bomb, though born from a desire for security, would fundamentally alter the strategic landscape. It would transform Iran from a regional power with nuclear ambitions into an actual nuclear-armed state, triggering a cascade of consequences for Israel, the United States, and the entire world. The immediate aftermath of Israel's military operation might be seen in Jerusalem as a tactical success, a necessary action to prevent an imminent threat. The destruction of key nuclear sites and the elimination of top scientists have undeniably set back Iran's program in the short term. However, this short-term gain may come at the cost of a far more dangerous and intractable long-term problem. If Tehran chooses the path of nuclear breakout, the world will face a profoundly altered reality. An Iran with a nuclear bomb is not just an Iran with a more powerful weapon, it is an Iran that operates under a completely different set of rules. The deterrence equation that has governed the Middle East for decades would be shattered forever. For Israel, the existential threat it sought to eliminate would become permanent and irreversible. A nuclear-armed Iran would create a terrifying balance of power, where any future conflict between the two nations could carry the risk of nuclear annihilation. Israel's conventional military superiority would be partially negated, as it would have to operate under the shadow of a potential nuclear response. Every regional crisis, every skirmish with an Iranian proxy like Hezbollah, would be fraught with a new and horrifying escalatory potential. The strategic freedom of action that allowed Israel to conduct the June 13th strikes would evaporate, replaced by a tense and unstable nuclear standoff that would define the security of the nation for generations to come. The consequences would ripple far beyond the immediate region, posing a grave challenge to the United States and global stability. A nuclear Iran would likely trigger a domino effect of nuclear proliferation across the Middle East. Other regional powers, such as Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt, would feel compelled to develop their own nuclear capabilities to counter the Iranian threat, leading to a multipolar nuclear arms race in the world's most volatile region. This would dramatically increase the chances of nuclear weapons being used in a future conflict, whether by design, miscalculation, or accident. The global non-proliferation regime, already under strain, could collapse entirely, ushering in a new and terrifying era of nuclear uncertainty. In the end, the Israeli strike, intended as a solution, may have created a far greater problem. While it may have bought time, it also may have eliminated any remaining political space for moderation within Iran, empowering hardliners who see nuclear weapons as their only salvation. The world is now left to grapple with this perilous outcome. Diplomacy may have failed to stop Iran's ambitions, but a military strike may have crystallized them into a determined and unstoppable quest. The real threat from Iran was never just its covert nuclear program, but the possibility that it would one day decide to build an actual bomb. Ironically, Israel's attack may have been the very event that pushed Tehran to cross that threshold, leading not to a safer Middle East, but to a world living on the edge of a nuclear precipice.